As we all know, the final part of the Conjuring series is coming out later this year. Rumors are that the movie will be based on the Snedeker family haunting. But besides that, the Conjuring universe had a big impact on the horror movies world. So in this video, we're going to discuss about the real stories behind all three Conjuring movies. Sit tight, relax, and enjoy. Some horror movies claim to be based on true events, but few are as terrifyingly real as The Conjuring. The chilling 2013 film introduced audiences to the Perron family's haunting. But what Hollywood didn't show was just how terrifying their experience really was. What if I told you that what happened in that Rhode Island farmhouse was even worse than what you saw on screen? This is the true story behind The Conjuring, one of the most infamous hauntings in American history. It was January 1971 when the Perron family moved into their new home, a sprawling 200-acre property in Harrisville, Rhode Island. With 5 young daughters, Roger and Carolyn Perron saw the house as a fresh start, a place to make memories. But little did they know, someone or something was already waiting for them. Almost immediately, the family began noticing strange occurrences. At first, they were small. A broom would go missing and reappear somewhere else. Doors would creak open on their own, and a faint smell of flowers would drift through the rooms. But soon, the playful pranks turned into something much darker. The Perron children began seeing shadowy figures in their rooms at night. They heard voices whispering their names, and the temperature would drop suddenly. Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter, later recalled waking up to find a tall, dark figure standing over her bed, watching, waiting. But perhaps the most terrifying presence was the one that seemed to fixate on Carolyn Perron, the mother. She began waking up with mysterious bruises and scratches on her body, with no memory of how they got there. Then, she started hearing a voice. Through local research, the Perrons uncovered the dark history of their home. The land once belonged to a woman named Bathsheba Sherman, who lived in the 1800s. According to the town legend, Bathsheba was accused of practicing witchcraft and sacrificing her infant child to Satan. Though she was never convicted, the townspeople believed Bathsheba cursed the land before she died, vowing that no one who lived there would ever know peace. As weeks turned into months, the haunting escalated. Carolyn felt an unseen force grabbing her in the night, leaving bruises and scratches on her skin. The family reported seeing a spirit with a broken neck wandering the hallways, and worst of all, something tried to possess Carolyn. Desperate for help, the Perrons reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, two of the most famous paranormal investigators in the world.
Well, we've been called demonologists. It's one name for us. Ghost hunters, paranormal researchers.
Kooks.
Lorraine, a gifted clairvoyant, immediately sensed an overwhelming darkness in the house. The Warrens determined that Bathsheba's spirit had latched onto Carolyn. She was slowly being possessed. The only way to stop it was a séance. What happened next was one of the most terrifying moments of the entire case. As the Warrens attempted to communicate with the spirit, Carolyn let out an unearthly scream. Her chair lifted off the ground and flew across the room. Roger Perron, fearing for his wife's life, demanded the séance stop immediately.
You hear me? I don't know what you are, but you leave my wife alone! God damn it! Let her go!
But the damage had been done. Though the spirit never fully possessed Carolyn, it never truly left her either. The Perron family remained in the house for another 10 years, unable to afford to move. Though the Warrens' intervention helped lessen the activity, the spirits never truly left. To this day, the house remains one of the most infamous paranormal locations in the world. Let's hear about this incident in detail from Andrea Perron herself.
That this was bigger, stronger, and more powerful than any of us had ever had a sense of. And none of us moved into that house thinking, ooh, I wonder if it's haunted. We were little kids. That concept never occurred to us. My parents are both Virgos. They're both very sensible, very pragmatic, very intelligent, very scientifically based people, both of them. And it took a while for my father to accept the fact that the house was haunted. But meanwhile, my mother was going through incredible turmoil, and my sisters were having experiences of their own. I was having experiences of my own. We could see that my mother was troubled by something, and so we did not impose what was happening with us, the 5 girls, on her. Instead, my sisters would come crawl into bed with me at night, sometimes crying, sometimes trembling, and would cuddle up to me and say, Annie, Annie, there are voices in my room and something's moving my bed. There are voices, and they all talk at once, and they all say the same thing. And that's my little sister Cindy, 8 years old. There are 7 dead soldiers buried in your wall. Over and over, almost like a chant. One voice, but several. 7. And she would crawl up in bed with me and cuddle up next to me and say, just keep me safe, I'm so afraid. And then she would come to me and say, Annie, there's a little girl that walks through my bedroom. She's tiny. She's maybe 4 or 5 years old, and she's crying for her mommy. And she looks just like you. She looks just like you. Well, Cindy didn't know what I looked like at 4 or 5 years old because she wasn't born yet. But she'd seen family photographs. And so she was describing this little girl. And then we thought there were 2 of them, because sometimes the little girl would appear in almost a flannel or a linen gray shift with a little white pinafore, and she looked very healthy and robust, and she'd often carry a book under her arm, and she'd walk through the bedroom. She'd come out of the eaves, she'd walk through the bedroom, and she'd go into the closet with the chimney, and she wouldn't say anything. She would just pass through. But when she'd come other times, she was dressed, she was emaciated. There was nothing left to her. And she was wearing a beautiful, beautiful green velvet, full-length dress. That was what she was buried in. And she's been there forever. And she's not the only one. Keep in mind, this house was on property that was deeded was surveyed by the original John Smith that came to Providence, to the Plymouth plantation at Plymouth Rock. And he did the surveying and the deeding for Roger Williams for the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, which is the actual name of the state. And the reason that Roger Williams parceled out huge pieces of property was to retain the state that he had founded as a colony. It was not a state for many years to come. But Connecticut, the colony of Connecticut, was trying to take their bite out of it, and Massachusetts was trying to take their bite out of it. So he gave vast tracts of land out, and this property was thousands of acres big originally. And the house, as it stands right now, was completed in 1736. So if you do the math, 8 full generations of one extended family lived in that house and died in that house prior to our arrival, and a number of them never left. Now, one of the things that we need to think in terms of when we think about our immortality, and every single one of us is immortal. We are quite literally more than a bumper sticker. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we come and we come and we come until, I suppose, we learn the lessons that we need to learn, until we are able to grapple with and grasp the enormity of our existence. And perhaps then, and I don't know, this series of books will not answer questions for you. It will force you to ask questions of yourself, to delve into your own intellect, to delve into your own ability to process emotionally what you are reading. And it will take you on our journey with us as if you had been taken by the hand and led right to that house with us. And you will experience and feel, you will not only feel 5 little girls growing up and everything that happened in the time that we were there, but you will also have a sense that you were there as well. I have thousands of readers who write to me routinely and tell me that this story so profoundly changed the way that they think about everything in life, that they never look at anything in their world the same way after having read this. And to me, that's the greatest gift, because we waited 30 years with purpose and reason. We waited until society had matured emotionally and intellectually to the point that there were vast numbers of us that could accept this, that could not even necessarily believe it, but at least be open to the possibilities, at least be open to the notion that there is something beyond our mortal existence, and that the way that we comport ourselves in this life matters. Because when my mother started doing the historical research, she always said, they're not just passing through. These people are somehow attached to this piece of property. And she began a very exhaustive, extensive research process trying to determine who had lived in the house, how long they had lived in the house, when they died, where they died, and why they're still there. We found out that the man that was leaning up in the corner of the parlor, the dining room when we moved in, is very likely Johnny Arnold, who crawled up into the eaves of my bedroom and drank horse liniment and killed himself and died an extremely excruciating death. And then there's little Prudence Arnold, who was raped and murdered by a farmhand. She was 11 years old. She doesn't know she's dead. It goes on and on. I can name them all. It doesn't mean that I'm absolutely right. It doesn't mean that the history has it exactly right, but we did our best to try to identify these spirits, and my mother did it with her own purpose, and that was to identify them and then perhaps usher them on, do something to help them move on, so that they were not eternally tethered to this property, so that they didn't have to live in that limbo and for all time. And time does not exist for them. It's an irrelevant notion for us. It's just how we measure our time on this planet, and we made it up because we had to have some way of saying, you know, we're here for this. But for the spirits, they have absolutely no notion of time. And they're also tethered to that property, and I know that they are because about 20 years after we left, my sister Cindy and Nancy, two of my sisters, decided that they wanted to go up to the farm and they wanted to visit. And the woman who owns the farm now was very gracious, and she allowed them to come in. And the first thing that happened is they got put, what Cindy always called being put in the bubble, where you can scream at the top of your lungs and a person that's 10 feet away won't hear you and won't know that you're in trouble and won't know that you're in distress. And they immediately got put in the bubble and felt hands on their faces and their hair being played with. And they both, without talking to each other, felt it. And the woman who owns the house now was talking to them, and they couldn't hear her. It was like Charlie Brown's teacher, wah, 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 wah. They couldn't even discern what she was saying because they were being spoken to directly by the spirit that was there to protect them from the evil presence in that house. And they sensed both of them. And she got right up in their faces and she said, "Oh my God, it's you. You're back." How would she know? How would she know? She recognized them. I took my father back there last year for the first time in 30 plus years that he had stepped foot on that property. He was immediately approached. I never walk into that house that something doesn't go flying, that something, a light just sparkles through the room. And it's their way of acknowledging us and recognizing us and telling us that they do. And so when I finished the books, it took 3 years to write all 3 books, and I did it to the exclusion of all else, quite literally. My mother says I lived on catnaps and coffee for 3 years. But when I walked into that house, after it was done, I felt enveloped as though I was being steeped in drawn butter, a sense of love and acceptance that I had never, ever felt in that house before. And it's because they know I've told their story. They know I've told it well, and I've been honest, and I've treated them fairly. And that includes Bathsheba. Bathsheba Sherman was a very young woman when she lived in that house. And she was in charge of an infant. She was about 16 or 17 years old. Well, that baby died. And when the doctor examined the corpse, found that a needle had been impaled in the base of its skull, and it had convulsed and died. Consequently, she was accused of murder. And because Burrillville, the town, was not even incorporated then, she had to be, there was an inquest, and she was taken to Chepachet, Rhode Island. And she was let off the hook, a la Lizzie Borden. She talked her way out of it. There's no way to know if she did this thing or not, this horrible thing, if she did this or not. But it didn't even matter because she was tried in the court of public opinion, and that woman lived her entire lifetime being called a harlot, being called a devil worshiper, being called a witch, that she had sold her soul to the devil for eternal youth and beauty. It is so much a part of the vernacular. It is so much a part of the folklore of that area of Rhode Island. Bathsheba Sherman was known far and wide, and she had 4 children, and they all died before the age of 4 years old. And she went from being a young, ravishing beauty to a shriveled, crippled horror of a woman who had a reputation for brutalizing her farmhands and her staff, who had a reputation for just being evil and bitter and vindictive. And her death certificate lists her death caused by paralysis, and the doctor who examined her said her body had literally turned to stone. She died in 1885.
So, was The Conjuring just another Hollywood ghost story? Or was it a terrifying glimpse into something beyond our understanding, the truth, maybe more disturbing than fiction? The Conjuring 2, released in 2016, is one of the most chilling entries in the Conjuring universe. It is based on one of the most infamous and controversial paranormal cases in history, the Enfield poltergeist, which gripped the attention of the world in 1977. In August 1977, strange occurrences were first reported at 284 Green Street in the quiet, working-class suburb of Enfield, North London. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4 children, became terrified when her 2 daughters, 11-year-old Janet and her older sister Margaret, reported hearing mysterious knocking sounds echoing through their home. These weren't isolated incidents. The noises were persistent and unexplainable. Desperate for help, Peggy reached out to her neighbors, who were also disturbed by the unsettling sounds. They experienced the knocking for themselves and were just as baffled. In their fear and confusion, Peggy contacted the local police. Officers arrived at the house and conducted an investigation. What happened next has become one of the most talked about aspects of the case. One of the officers reportedly witnessed a chair moving across the room on its own, an event that has since become part of Enfield folklore. With no logical explanation in sight, the Hodgsons reached out to the press. What followed were stories that gripped the public's imagination. Over the course of 18 months, the house became a focal point for media attention and paranormal investigations. Eyewitness accounts, including those from neighbors, journalists, and investigators, described a series of bizarre and terrifying phenomena. Furniture was seen moving by itself. Objects were hurled across rooms.
Oh, what's that?
And inexplicable knocking and scratching sounds echoed through the walls. One of the most unsettling aspects of the case was Janet herself, who appeared to be the focal point of the disturbances. She was reportedly thrown from her bed by unseen forces, and there were claims of paranormal whistling and disembodied voices. Perhaps the most chilling claim came when Janet began speaking in a harsh, guttural voice that sounded like that of an old man.
600. 600 the voices. I know the joke.
This voice, which came to be known as Bill, claimed to be the spirit of a man who had died in the house years earlier. Recordings of Janet speaking in this voice were captured during investigations, further fueling the mystery. One of the most iconic images from the case is the photograph of Janet seemingly levitating in mid-air. This image became a symbol of the haunting and sparked fierce debate. Skeptics argue that the photograph merely shows Janet jumping off her bed, while believers view it as concrete evidence of supernatural activity. Regardless of one's stance, the image remains one of the most well-known pieces of evidence from the Enfield case. The growing media attention attracted the interest of the Society for Psychical Research. 2 of its members, inventor-turned-paranormal investigator Maurice Grosse and writer Guy Lyon Playfair, were dispatched to study the phenomenon. Grosse and Playfair spent months observing and documenting the events at the Hodgson home. Playfair would later publish his book, This House is Haunted, detailing their experiences and observations. During their investigation, they witnessed a range of unexplainable occurrences. Grosse conducted multiple interviews with Janet, including the sessions where she spoke in the eerie Bill voice. However, the investigation wasn't without controversy. Some skeptics accused Janet of fabricating the phenomena, suggesting that the events were elaborate pranks or the result of psychological stress. Janet herself admitted to playing tricks on occasion, but insisted that only a small fraction of the events were staged, claiming the majority were genuine.
There's a house in a terraced street in Ponders End, North London, where the events of the past 2 months have baffled all who've heard about them and scared the life out of those who've been directly involved. This is the home of Mrs. Peggy Hodgson and her family. At the moment, the children are being looked after by relatives because Mrs. Hodgson is ill in bed. The sequence of bizarre happenings which unfolded round these children and their mother in September have made the walls of the house rattle with the impact of flying objects and the sound of mysterious knockings. Soon a second family was drawn into the action, the next-door neighbours, Peggy and Vic Nottingham.
We'd been sitting listening to the knocking, and the woman next door, she called me in. We couldn't make out what it was. I heard the knocking as I walked in the front door, but I went all over the house, checked it, checked the walls, checked everything. Just couldn't make out what it was. So in the end, I thought to myself, well, there's only one thing. I'll call the police.
One of the 2 police officers sent to investigate made the following remarkable statement about what they heard and saw in this living room. There were 4 distinct taps on the wall, and then silence. About 2 minutes later, I heard more tapping from a different wall. The other police constable checked the walls, attic, and pipes, but could find nothing to explain the knocking. The eldest son of the family pointed to a chair next to the sofa. I then saw the chair slide across the floor. It moved approximately 3 to 4 feet and then came to rest. I checked the chair, but could find nothing to explain how it had moved.
The police definitely wanted to get out of the house.
How could you tell?
They was as frightened as I was. And then the second night we went back in there again, and we got the same reactions again. We got this knocking, and then this here Lego. I witnessed a box of Lego underneath a chair, but I walked into the room. As I walked into the room, the Lego began to fly. But where it was coming from, I don't know. One piece hit me on the arm, and
Did it hurt?
Oh, it brought a lump up. It caught me on the elbow, and it brought a lump up. And as I
One
say,
tiny little piece?
one tiny little piece of Lego. Now it's not much bigger than a 3/4 inch, but it caught me on the elbow, and as I say, it brought a lump up.
In the absence of a law against chairs that move on their own, the police were powerless to act. So the neighbours called in the man from the Society for Psychical Research. Maurice Gross is an inventor who devotes his leisure to investigating the supernatural. Since coming on the case, he's made several recordings of what he says are unique examples of a poltergeist in action. Tapes can, of course, be faked, but in this one, recorded in a bedroom after the family had gone to bed, the reactions of the Hodgson children to some very strange occurrences seem totally genuine.
All the lights gone out. Oh. Wait. Squeeze the light out.
Throw the lamp
on the head.
right way across the room and pull it out of the socket.
Quick, turn the lamp off.
The light plug was pulled from the socket 3 times after that. Then, after a period of watching and waiting, something even stranger happened.
Who's that shaking the door? Oh. What's on there? Mum's laughing. Oh! What's that?
The slipper was thrown across the room and hit
Oh,
the door
not my one.
as I was holding the door.
My one.
The white slipper hit the door as I was holding the door.
He hit me on the leg. Where's the other one?
The other one's over here.
What sort of a case is this in your experience?
Well, I think this is probably the best case this century. In fact, as far as documentation is concerned, it may be the best case of all time.
What special aspects make it so?
Well, the entity itself has been very, very violent at times, and of course the witnesses and the documentation have been excellent. The violent things I've seen happen are the the furniture moving, the furniture being thrown upside down. In fact, one night I was standing here, there were about 11 or 12 people in the room, and I was standing talking to one of the members of the family, and in front of the settee, and the settee went straight up in the air and turned upside down, right in front of me, no more than a foot away from me.
What particular tape stands out in your mind?
Well, I think one particular tape that stands out in my mind is the incident where I was communicating with it quite a long while, very seriously, and then something happened which was very funny indeed.
Knock. 1 for no and 2 for yes. Are you a male spirit? 1 for no and 2 for yes.
2.
That's 2. You are a male spirit. Did you used to live in this house? You did. Was it more than 50 years ago? Yes. Did you die in this house? Did you pass on? You did pass on in this house. Now, why are you here? Are you unhappy? You're not unhappy. But why are you here? Is it because you want to give us a special message? No. You don't want to give us a special message. Are you having a game with me? Oh, right.
Oh, crumbs. Oh.
As I asked the question, are you having a game with me? It threw the cardboard box and the pillow right at my face. Well, thank you very much. That was a very good answer.
And we was all just standing in the kitchen, all of us together. And then all of a sudden a pool of water come from nowhere in the middle of the floor in the kitchen. And then we heard the toilet chain pull, and there was no one at all out in the toilet. We was all in the kitchen, and the door opened in the toilet. Then the chain went, and as we walked out there, the toilet brush came from the thing what it was in, the container, and the brush just come up and settled on top of the toilet, just like that, as if someone had just got in there, pulled the chain, and then took the brush up and to wash the toilet. And the doors, well, and then the bathroom door opens, and the kitchen table has just tipped up, and there's Janet, one of the girls, she's been just sitting on the chair, and she's been thrown completely across the room.
There's a child's chair, I bet it weighs about 10 pounds, padded by with metal legs. And the child is sleeping in a single bed one side of the room, and I was sitting on a single bed the other side of the room, with his chair in the middle. The child went to sleep, and all of a sudden she got a little bit restless. Well, just after that, his chair was lifted off the ground, and it was thrown about 9 foot through the air, a good 9 foot, for no reason whatsoever. No one was on the end of it. Didn't touch no one, just went a straight line down the room.
And what did you do?
I ran out the room again. You know, I mean, when you see these things, there's nothing on the end of them. You begin to shake.
The third family to be caught up in the story was John and Sylvia Burkham, who live a few doors away. John is Mrs. Hodgson's brother, and he and Sylvia have spent hours at the Hodgson's house, trying to help them through all the unexplained goings-on. But they've had plenty of shocks of their own.
Now, what happened in this bedroom?
Well, I heard a noise downstairs. I come up, and there was the eldest girl on the floor. But the other one's missing. So I look under this bed, I look under this one, and as I stand up, I see it. There she is, across this radio, one leg in the air, and her head hanging down. Just to prove that I wasn't mad, I yelled for my wife to come up to see what I have just seen. But she was asleep.
As a roof repairer, Vic Nottingham is used to tall stories, but he never thought he'd play a leading role in one like this.
I've got one chap at work, for instance, and he says to me, "How's your ghost getting on?" Now, I mean, it's no good talking to a chap like that, because he's got no reaction on it whatsoever. he thinks that I'm going round the bloody bend, like, you know what I mean? But
Do you think you are?
well, I was straight. I mean, I'm 44 and I've never witnessed anything like it before in my life. But the only thing that worries me, see, being a roofer by trade, is beginning to get on top of you. Your nerves begin to shatter a little bit.
In every story of things that go bump in the night, there are two possibilities. One, that it's a hoax. Two, that there's something going on beyond the grasp of the human mind. If this is a hoax, it means that some of the 17 people who've seen things have been playing an elaborate and twisted joke on the others. If it isn't a hoax, it means that either those 17 people have all been having hallucinations, including the police, or this is the best documented ghost story of all time.
Can you tell me why you are upsetting this family? Is it because you enjoy doing it? You do enjoy doing it. Well, I suggest that now you've got... Now, what does that mean? Why have you done 3 knocks? Now, I ask you the question again. 2 knocks for yes, and 1 knock for no. Now, yes, that's right, you understand. Now, do you enjoy upsetting this family? You do? Well, now, will you please go away? Because I think you've had enough of your jokes. You won't go away. But I would like you to go away, and go away because I think you've been upsetting this family long enough, and it's time you went away. You understand me? Please go away. Yes, you must go away. It's absolutely essential that you go away. No, you mustn't be obstinate. You must go away. Well, you must. I'm sorry, but you must stop annoying this family. You've had enough. You've had a good time. Now, please go away. All right? Please go away. I can't say any more to you now. Goodbye. Goodbye.
These teenage sisters believe they're haunted by a poltergeist.
I was going to ask the same question as I asked earlier. How many voices are there?
600.
600 the voices.
I know the joke.
How many really are there, Margaret?
I think so far we've had 10
Three.
sensible voices, but the rest of the names are absolute rubbish.
11-year-old Janet Hodgson appears to be the focus of many of the strange happenings in Green Street. But they also affect her 14-year-old sister Margaret and their younger brother Billy. One of the first manifestations was when Lego bricks began to fly at high speed around the living room.
How does it feel to be haunted by a poltergeist?
It's not haunted. Shut up.
Why isn't it haunted?
I don't know.
Does it frighten you, the things that happen here?
Oh, well, it did first, but now I've got more used to it. And you learn to accept the things that happen.
It's like covered it, Mum. Might eat it, Mum. Slung a bookshelf at Margaret.
Have you tried telling it to go away?
Yes,
Yeah,
many
no
times.
answer, nothing.
And what does it reply?
No, it won't. It's staying another 6-7 years.
The local police could find no explanation for the knocking either. They were even more baffled when 2 of their beat constables reported seeing an armchair levitate across the Hodgsons' living room.
It came off the floor, or nearly a ½ inch, I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. I checked to see whether or not it could possibly have slid along the floor. I placed a marble on the floor to see whether or not the marble would go in the same direction as the chair did, and it didn't roll at all. I checked for wires under the cushion of the chair, and I could find no explanation at all.
Maurice Gross is an electronics engineer and an investigator for the Society for Psychical Research.
Over here was Janet, and over here, in this bed here, was Margaret.
It was in the same bedroom a month later, with all the family present, that Maurice Gross first challenged the poltergeist to talk.
And this was actually the result. You'll hear here the whistling first of all, and then the barking. And here is this noise. The barking here is quite extraordinary, actually.
We got a dog here.
I then said to it, I then, as I said on the tape here, I then said to it, if you can whistle and bark and groan, then you can talk. And I asked it to actually say my name.
Oh,
Well, just a minute. Right, we'll try again. I want you to call out my name, my complete name, Maurice Gross. See if you can do that. Very good. Let me hear you say my name again. Come on, let me hear you say my name. Come on, my name's Maurice. Let me hear you say it. Maurice. Now that was the first time we heard the voice, and since then we've been hearing it again and again, and it's been getting louder and louder.
What about the voices? When did the voices start?
December the 12th.
December the 12th?
Yes.
And how did they start?
Well, one night Mr. Gross was talking about it about 8:30. He said, all we need now is the voices to talk. And that night I went to bed and can't remember exactly what happened. And
what's that knocking?
yeah,
Can hear it now. I was doing that yesterday morning, and Peggy was on her own, so she come in to us, because it wasn't her. She come in, we sat together and we heard it, and I counted down my knocks and there was 14 altogether, and it's doing it again now.
That was 3 knocks just now.
Yes, it goes in 3s and 2s.
how we first got contacted, this was when Mr. Gross said, if there's anyone there, knock twice for yes, and if not, 1 for no.
I wonder if we did that now, whether it would answer. Is anybody there? Is anybody there? Nothing. No.
It doesn't always do it to order.
No, it doesn't. It goes in spasms. Like we're talking now. It may not now, after you've said that, but it won't do it when you want it to, straight away. No.
What about the voices? They sometimes say things and make answers. Is that the voice now?
Yeah.
Is anybody there? How many voices are there?
Dirty Dick, Andrew Garner, and Stuart Thurton.
Dirty Dick, Andrew Gardner, and Stuart
Thurton.
Oh, has he ever spelt that for you?
No.
Mr. Ghost asked him, but something distracted Mr. Ghost last night when he asked. That was some time ago.
And
So
what do you think these are? Are they people or are they just voices?
Could be spirits, oh, I don't know.
I believe it's a
Ghosts,
a spirit speaking for us somehow. No. We don't get this at school, these voices are. Because I believe when we're all separate, it's not so strong.
Just when you come near each other?
Yeah, like here, or our aunts, we're all up there together, or in Peggy's next door.
And Janet's, your voice is stronger, isn't it? It seems to be the strongest.
Yeah.
When you hear the voice and it comes out, where does it come from? Here, your throat?
No.
Where do you feel it comes
Back
from?
of the neck.
Back of the neck.
And so it must be as if it's somebody else speaking then, when you hear it.
Yeah, behind us.
And do you get the feeling when you hear the voice that there is a person there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And do they tell you much about themselves?
Not really, no.
They just tend to growl and...
Play around and sort of joke and be silly.
I wonder, do you think there's anyone there just now?
Yeah. I do.
Who's that?
What?
Who's that, Janet?
Pardon? Stuart Certain.
Stuart Certain, and he's one of the voices.
Yeah.
Why do you think he comes and speaks through you?
To annoy us.
Does he ever say anything nice?
Well, don't know really.
Shall we try and speak to him? No. We'll see if he'll speak to us.
Yeah.
Is anybody there?
No.
Who's there?
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who?
Goose chasers here.
Mr. Gross, a lot of people, hearing these voices produced by the children, will simply say that they are very good ventriloquists and that this is all a hoax. How would you react to that?
Certainly not. They're certainly not very good ventriloquists. We have had tests on them to see whether they can ventriloquize. They can't. To keep up this particular type of voice for any length of time without damage to the vocal cords is absolutely impossible. I mean, there must be some hoarseness attached to it. But don't forget, these children don't do this for a couple of minutes or so. They do it for lengths of periods up to 3 hours, and without any hoarseness or sore throats whatsoever. Well, perhaps you've got something to say to them.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how you make this noise without bashing Janet's vocal cords to pieces. If I do it for half a minute, I get a sore throat. Joe?
Guy Lyon Playfair is an author of books on the paranormal, with experience of poltergeist cases in Europe and Brazil.
How do you do it, mate?
God, they can hours.
Don't you ever get a sore throat, Janet?
No.
Sure.
Yeah.
You never get pain in the back of the neck or something?
No. Oh, what do you mean? I'm sorry, I'm not with you. What? I feel,
Oh, you with me now? With you?
Sensation in the back of the neck, yeah.
Well, tell us about that.
I don't know how to
No, tell me
explain.
about that. You get it? Do you get it now? It's buzzing in the
When
back of
you
the neck.
talk, yeah.
Do you feel it vibrating as if it was sort of
No, like someone
someone
got
what?
their hand on the back of my neck like that.
Poltergeists seem to thrive on an atmosphere of tension that is partly sexual. The fact that most of the focuses are adolescents seems to contribute to the mischievous nature of the effects. leading some to suggest that the kids are faking or enjoying a laugh at the expense of the investigators. But to create all the bizarre effects that went on in this house either involves a gigantic conspiracy with the neighbours or a disruption in our laws of mind and matter.
I'm invisible.
I'm invisible.
You're invisible? Why are you invisible? I'm a G-H-O-S-T.
Because I'm a G-H-O-S-T. Yes, he had quite a sense of humour. He also used to swear a lot as well. I'm Maurice Gross, and I'm one of Britain's leading psychic investigators. I'm 76 now, and still on the trail of ghosts and poltergeists. In 1977, I led a team which investigated what is now regarded as the world's most famous poltergeist case, the Enfield poltergeist. It became world headlines at the time, mainly because of the strange, gruff voice that came from a girl called Janet. Hollywood soon got in on the act, and the makers of several box office hits acknowledge a debt to my case in Enfield. I've never been able to forget that voice. He called himself many names, but mostly Bill or Fred. I still listen to the 180 hours of tapes I recorded during the investigation.
Row, 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 the pub jet is down the street. Merrily, 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 lovely part the train. Now f***ing now.
This voice is coming from an 11-year-old girl. Well, perhaps, Guy, perhaps you've got something to say to them.
Yeah.
I'd like to know how you make this noise without bashing Janet's vocal cords to pieces. If I do it for half a minute, I get a sore throat.
Goose chases here.
And we found that on analysis, the voice was not made by the larynx, the voice box, but by the false vocal fold, which is above the larynx. And you only use that when you lose your voice and you talk like that. Well, if you talk like that for more than a couple of minutes, you start getting a sore throat. Talk like that for 5 minutes or so and you're going to start doing damage to your throat. And yet this voice used to speak up to 3 hours at a time. Not continuously, of course, but up to 3 hours at a time without the girl showing any distress at all. Absolutely remarkable. The voice was just part of it. The girl levitated, going from horizontal to vertical in a sixth of a second. Furniture was thrown around the rooms. The house was swarming with journalists. But after 4 days, they were baffled and frightened and called my team for help. A policewoman gave a sworn affidavit of the extraordinary activity she witnessed. Even the ghost chipped in. The death certificate confirmed the truth of what the ghost was saying. Many objects materialised out of thin air. Spoons were bent. Fires broke out spontaneously in the impoverished family's home. The family had to endure practically every known phenomena in a poltergeist case. They were traumatised. They didn't benefit financially and were ostracised by many of their local community. The Enfield poltergeist menaced that family for 18 months. It nearly destroyed their lives. I'm going back to see them for the first time in 20 years. Janet, the girl at the centre of it all, prefers to remain anonymous, but I spoke to her mother and sister. Well, here I am at this famous house in Enfield, and here you see Margaret and her mother, who were very, very involved in this case. You remember the day I first came?
Yes, I remember, Mr. Rose, and you was on the case ever since then, onwards, and you saw everything and took note and explained to us
You remember when the reporters and journalists were here, how did they carry on?
I could see the fear in some of their faces also, and they probably could sense that we was dead scared and wanted to run out any minute. I know I did. My sister did, I know that.
I remember one of them came in and he explained to me that I'd got a poltergeist in the house. And I said, what on earth's that? And I nearly fainted when he told me. I didn't even know what it was. In fact, I don't think any of us did.
And we couldn't even say the word poltergeist until Mr. Groves from Psychical Research explained how to say poltergeist.
That's me.
and also what it actually meant in, was it German? Was it?
Yeah, poltergeist, noisy ghost.
In the meaning of it.
That,
also, which he explained to us.
What do you say to people who say to you, with you children playing around, what do you say about that?
I say that's a matter of opinion. If you haven't experienced it, you're going to say that. But it did really happen.
It upsets me deep down to think that they can't give us an open mind, the ones that just put it down completely. But all I can say to them is I wish they could experience the same thing as what we went through. They certainly wouldn't say it was false or fake or it was child playing or anything of that kind.
The welfare of people at the centre of poltergeist activity is very important. I believe that most poltergeist activity is actually caused by very high levels of stress. Occasionally you get paranormal entities interacting with this. And this is what I think happened at Enfield. I haven't spent all my years searching for the paranormal. Like everybody else, I had a normal life to lead. When I left school, I was a commercial artist. I did 2 years apprenticeship. You can see on the pictures on the wall, well, actually they are my pictures that I have done. I turned into quite a good commercial artist, in fact. But then the war was looming, and I joined the Royal Artillery, super heavy guns. We had to make a hasty retreat back to Dunkirk, when of course thousands of other troops. And we were bombed and blitzed to hell there. It really was rough going. I suppose I was one of the reasonably lucky ones. I got off on a destroyer. I met Betty at a tea dance in Marble Arch. Always very taken with her right from the word go. And it was on a Sunday, and I met her on a Sunday, proposed to her on the Thursday, and in 10 weeks we were married. Because everybody said at the time, oh, these war marriages, it would never last, it would never last. I don't know, perhaps it won't. I mean, it's only 51 years now, so I suppose I think I can say it last. We've had a good life. Youngest daughter Janet in a road accident. Betty and I believe that Janet tried to contact us after her physical death. You might believe that was just our way of dealing with bereavement, but it was a turning point in my life. I decided to carry out serious research into the paranormal and join the Society for Psychical Research. This is now my psychic HQ. The Society is the world's leading centre for the scientific study of the paranormal. I'm the chairman of the Spontaneous Phenomena Committee. People write to us from all around the country with their strange cases, which we investigate on a non-fee paying basis. Can you recap on who he said was psychologically disturbed?
He said
what name of who was it? Because there's so many names.
That's the covering letter, isn't it?
Yeah, on the covering letter. There's so many people mentioned there.
Yes, I was wondering that.
Expert in the early 60s and a retired university lecturer.
Well, I think we can dispense with that case then, yeah.
Eventually, after 18 months of turmoil, the strange activity ceased. But the emotional scars remained. Janet spent time in Maudsley Psychiatric Hospital in London, a period that deeply affected her. Years later, she has spoken candidly about the lingering trauma caused by the events and the media frenzy that followed. In recent interviews, including appearances in documentaries and TV series, Janet has maintained that what happened to her and her family was real. She remains firm in her belief that they were subjected to forces beyond their understanding. The Conjuring 2 dramatizes the case by focusing on renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are portrayed as playing a pivotal role in solving the mystery. However, historical records suggest that the Warrens had only a minimal involvement in the actual Enfield case. While they did visit the Hodgson home, their contribution to the investigation was brief and not as central as the film suggests. To this day, the Enfield poltergeist remains one of the most hotly debated paranormal cases in history. Was it an elaborate hoax, a case of mass hysteria, or a genuine encounter with the supernatural? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
The Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It is the third addition to the Conjuring series. It is based on the trial of Arne Cheyenne Johnson, which took place in 1981. The movie came out in 2021, and people didn't like it as much as compared to the first two movies. So in this video, we're going to talk about the real story behind Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can reach our 10K subscribers goal before the end of the year. On February 16th, 1981, Arne Cheyenne Johnson stabbed his landlord Alan Bono to death with a 5-inch pocket knife, committing the first murder ever recorded in the 193-year history of Brookfield. Johnson was found 2 miles down the road, taken to prison, and held under $125,000 bail. But what actually happened on that day? Johnson called in sick to work, but instead of staying home, he went to join his girlfriend at work, Debbie Glatzel. By this time, she was employed at Bono's kennel, and the couple were living in one of Bono's rental apartments. Later that day, Bono took Johnson, Debbie, and a couple of other workers out for lunch at the local pub. When they all returned to Bono's apartment later that day, Debbie went to buy Bono some pizza in an effort to sober him up. The court heard at the time that when Debbie returned, there was a palpable tension between Johnson and Bono as the two fought over a broken television set. Debbie convinced everyone to leave, but Johnson turned back to the apartment. Debbie put herself between Bono and Johnson. A flurry of activity followed, she said, and she recalled Johnson growling like an animal while something shiny flashed in the air. All of a sudden, it just stopped, she said, and Johnson walked into some nearby woods, staring straight ahead. Bono, at that point, collapsed to the ground, face first. Not far from him was the knife, with the 5-inch blade that Johnson always carried. There were 4 or 5 tremendous wounds, according to Johnson's lawyer, including one that extended from the stomach to the base of the heart. He died a few hours later. After his arrest, Arne Johnson made an incredible claim: "The devil made me do it." Aided by 2 paranormal investigators, the 19-year-old's attorneys presented their client's claim of demonic possession as a potential defense for his murder of Bono. It was the first time in history that a defense like this one was used in an American courtroom. But why did Johnson use this as his defense? A year before Bono's murder, in the summer of 1980, Debbie's brother David claimed that he'd repeatedly encountered an old man who would taunt him. At first, Johnson and Glatzel thought David was just trying to get out of doing chores and dismissed the story entirely. Nonetheless, the the encounters continued, growing both more frequent and more violent. David would wake up crying hysterically, describing visions of a man with big black eyes, a thin face with animal features and jagged teeth. Before long, the family asked a priest from a church nearby to bless their home to no avail, so they hoped that paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren could lend a hand. He would kick, bite, spit, swear terrible words, David's family members said of his possession. He experienced strangling attempts by invisible hands, which he tried to pull from his neck. Arne Johnson stayed with the family to help however he could. But disturbingly, the child's nightly terrors began to seep into the daytime as well. David described seeing an old man with a white beard, dressed in a flannel shirt and jeans. And as the child's visions continued, suspicious noises began emanating from the attic. Meanwhile, David started hissing, having seizures, and speaking in strange voices while quoting John Milton's Paradise Lost and the Bible. Reviewing the case, the Warrens concluded that this was clearly a case of demonic possession. Warrens claimed that over the course of 3 subsequent exorcisms oversaw by priests, David levitated, cursed, and even stopped breathing. Perhaps even more astonishingly, David allegedly predicted the murder that Arne Cheyenne Johnson would eventually commit. The Conjuring 3 starts from this exorcism. By October 1980, Arne Johnson started taunting the demonic presence, telling it to stop bothering his fiancée's brother. "Take me on, leave my little buddy alone," he cried. And the devil heard him. A year after this, Johnson murdered Bono. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, differs greatly from real-life events.
She was here! She was in our house!
With a fictionalized account of them investigating the supposed demonic possession of Johnson and David Glatzel previously, it ends up involving a Satanist known only as the Occultist, who is carrying out a curse that saw her target 2 girls in Danvers, Massachusetts. And, during the movie's final act, Ed Warren is also targeted to stop Lorraine from stopping the curse. During this time, the Occultist is also continuing to target Johnson in prison, with Debbie and David helping to protect him. This part of the movie was all made up, and it didn't happen in the real case. After serving about 5 years in prison, Johnson was released in 1986. He married his fiancée Debbie while he was still behind bars, and as of 2014, they were still together. Johnson and Debbie had 2 children. Although they lived life largely under the radar, Debbie passed away recently. The Warrens stuck to their story that the devil was involved in Bono's murder.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Secrets of the Supernatural. I'm your moderator, Tony Spera, along with Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren. Tonight we're going to speak of a fascinating case that happened right here in Connecticut, the Brookfield Demon Murder Case, which was also made into a book that we have here, and also made into a movie of the week called The Demon Murder Case. And what I'd like to do is start off, if I could, with you, Lorraine. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in this case right from the start?
We were contacted by Father Dennis, who at that time was pastor of St. Joseph's Church in Brookfield, Tony. And the call came in, and he spoke about a young boy who he had been trying to help, but recognized it as a case of possession. He told me that he was very leery of becoming involved in this case because he had been assigned by the bishop to exorcise another home, but this was not of an individual now, of a home that had infestation going on that we investigated. But he said, "I want you to know that you have my prayers." At that time, he was going to Ireland with his mom, and he was concerned, I think, that the devil would get back at him maybe through his mother. Now, he spoke of David and David's problems. He said that David had a slight learning disability, but there was very bizarre behavior occurring to this young 11-year-old boy. When he mentioned about the boy's problem with a learning disability, we had contacted a doctor in Trumbull, Dr. Giangrasso, and asked him if he would be willing to go to the home with us that night. It was a real hot night, Tony. And the reason we asked Dr. Giangrasso was because he too had a son with a similar problem. And we felt that if there were a type of medication maybe that David would be on that might have been causing it, that he would recognize that. But that was not the case. David's case was not severe enough to have any type of medication. David was in the very beginning stages of demonic possession. We went to the house this hot night. I can remember like the steam and the moisture coming off the ground. It was a weird night when we arrived there. First, Ed tripped going up the steps into the house. And Dr. Giangrasso made kind of a laughing comment. And he tripped and fell too. And when we got in the house, we were sitting there at the table talking. Now you would watch David, and he would be doodling, you know, drawing or something like that, and he'd be concentrating on what he was doing. And then he would look up, and it was no longer a little 11-year-old boy.
Now this 11-year-old boy would become extremely strong. I seen nights when it would take 4 and 5 men to hold him down. He would be ranting and raving and yelling. There was times when he would attack his mother. Now this boy loved his mother. He loved his father. And at one time he actually broke the mother's nose, I believe. Arne Johnson, who was a young man that was engaged to his sister, Debbie, would help every night to control the boy. He'd come home from work, he was a landscaper, worked very hard, and he'd have his supper, lay down, but then just around 11 o'clock was when this would occur to David. As Lorraine said, all of a sudden you'd look at him, he was normal, the next second it wasn't David anymore. And this would go on until the sun came up. The boy would roll around, he would go into fits. I seen one time when he actually levitated, had extreme strength, terrible obscenities would come from him. And Arne Johnson, who was a young man, who I would call probably an all-American boy. He loved sports, he was into baseball, he had many awards for baseball. He loved fishing, and he and Debbie, his fiancée, who was David's sister, would go off fishing and they'd have a good time. But this kid, 18 years old at the time, would stay awake all night long and then go to work the next morning. But he made a fatal mistake. One night he said, and he screamed at these devils, "Take me on. Leave my little buddy alone." He got his wish.
He challenged the
He challenged the demonic. Now, by this time, Tony, into the case, the Catholic priests were already involved. Father Dennis had left for Ireland. Another young priest was assigned to the parish at that time, and another young man who had just recently been ordained was also assigned there. They came to visit us, and the two of them, finally, it grew to having 6 priests involved in it. 6 priests.
3 of them.
3 of them.
From the Vatican.
3 of them ordained and schooled in Rome, these men. And they were very frightened of the things that Arne would say. He was such a compassionate young man, such a low-key person. Never once did I see him show any type of violent behavior. He was a perfect gentleman, Mr. and Mrs. Warren, everything, just a beautiful person, tremendous respect for the priest.
If you were going to have a son, he'd be the boy you'd want.
Yeah, that's the kind of a boy he was, Tony.
But he made that fatal mistake.
And
challenging the devils.
And I know that one of the Catholic priests even met with him to talk with him because he was so concerned about his welfare. And because, like you say, he challenged it, Tony. And remember that when you challenge the demonic, it doesn't act at that particular given time, Tony. It waits until you are the most vulnerable, and then it strikes.
When you least suspect it.
When you least
Now,
suspect.
what happened was actually, Arne had gone to a pizza parlor with Debbie, his fiancée, and his sisters. They met Alan Bono there, a friend of theirs. They went back to the Bono's house, and Arne disappeared for a few minutes. When he came back, he was somebody entirely different.
What? Now, when
he doesn't recognize or know anything about what happened from that point on.
Well, now, Tony, we're going to backtrack from time to time.
What I'd like to do, if I could interrupt for one moment. I know, Ed, that you and Lorraine both have brought slides tonight. You think perhaps we should look at perhaps the first few slides just to get an idea of what this was all about?
Yes, that's a good idea.
So if we could, I'd like to bring up, if we could bring up that first slide, and we'll let you talk about it.
The first slide, of course, is of St. Joseph's Church in Brookfield, Connecticut.
All right.
This is where the first exorcism took place.
Okay.
And it's an exorcism that I'll never forget. The first one actually was in the convent, and that was not successful. It was that morning when David came under possession and would not get into the car. He ran away from his family. He had a knife. He actually tried to kill his mother and his grandmother. And this is not David. David was a very complacent child, very docile. And when I walked in, he was laying on the bed in a fetus position. This priest was standing alongside of him. And I said to the priest, "Don't stand so close," because he had a bad habit of taking his fist and just hitting you. The priest backed up, and suddenly that boy rose up out of the bed very swiftly, landed on the floor, ran into a bathroom, and locked the door. He would not come out. Hysterical laughter came from the bathroom. Finally, we broke the door. We got him out of there. We brought him to the convent at St. Joseph's, where the exorcism was performed on September 9th, the birthday of the Blessed Mother.
Yes, September 8th.
And we felt that this would be successful. And he told us that what they called the beast, which was seen many times in the house and out in the grounds, was back at the house. I went back there, and I had taken holy water with me while the priest stayed in the convent. I then went through the house, and I used what we call religious provocation. I sprinkled the holy water, and there was a rocking chair there. This rocking chair suddenly started to move back violently, back and forth. There were loud pounding sounds in the house. And then what I could hear is growling down in the cellar. Now, these were some of the sounds that we heard the very first night that we went there with Dr. Giangrasso. But it sounded like somebody had a 2x4 and was hitting the floor underneath us, but nobody was there.
Yeah, the floor.
Now what's this second slide that we're going to see here, Ed?
All right, these are some of the headlines. Terrifying story behind the devil-made youth kill case. That's Debbie Glotzel that you see there, who was a fiancée of Arne, and that's Arne way over in the corner up there.
Okay.
And we can see the next one.
Okay, they're showing you as the investigators in the case.
Yes.
Now, what year did you say this was?
1980 that we became involved in the case, Tony. But, you know, one thing that we have to stress that's very important is that we knew it was inevitable that there was going to be a tragedy. We knew it. We even notified the police.
Because of the violence. And Lorraine did notify the police, Chief.
What did they have to say about it?
Well, there was nothing we could do in advance.
In other words, before the fact, there's nothing.
Before the fact, there was nothing they could do except watch and go to the calls whenever they would happen at the home. But all the priests knew it. It wasn't just myself. It was all of the priests who were well aware that it was inevitable there would be a tragedy. But never, ever did we think it would be Arne Johnson.
Now, keep in mind that we had psychiatrists look at this boy. They told us, point blank, the boy was not mentally ill.
Oh, no.
The outward manifestations that we look for in case of possession occurred in that house. Furniture moving around, pounding sounds, the hystericalness of the boy, the strength of the boy, speaking in other languages. It was just a stereotype possession case. We could look at some more of those slides. We'll show the mother and father.
Here's another article, I guess, on the
This is another
possession.
one.
Yes, that's Arne Johnson.
There.
In the left-hand corner there.
Yes.
What's
Now,
the next
if,
slide?
You know, if the judge had let us bring in our evidence, which were recordings, photographs, eyewitness accounts, and the priests. The priests were waiting outside of the courthouse in Danbury, Connecticut, to go into that courthouse
To testify?
and testify that what occurred to this young boy and Arne Johnson was indeed diabolical possession. But I could understand the judge's feelings too. He didn't want to be known as the judge who allowed the devil made me do it case into his courtroom.
Right. Okay, I guess this is an article that talks about you
The devil
and...
made him do it. And the devil did make him do it.
Oh, yeah, we were
Arne
all...
Johnson was under diabolical possession. He didn't know what happened for at least 2 hours. In that 2 hours, he had killed Alan Bono. This young man wouldn't hurt anyone or anything. You'd have to know Arne Johnson like we knew him. Very polite, a very good living young man, very hardworking. He'd work until 5 o'clock, landscaping, cutting trees, have his supper, go to bed until 11. Then he'd get up and he'd stay up all night long, holding this young boy down.
He would have David sleep next to him so that the family, the parents, Judy and Carl Glotzel, this took a terrible toll on this family. You cannot believe the emotional and physical toll.
I always said that if a court would allow us to bring our evidence into this guy, that there is the lawyer, Martin Manella,
Yeah.
and he put his position in jeopardy as a lawyer by going in on this case, but he knew that the boy was possessed. He felt we could win the case, never knowing that the judge would not allow us to bring in our evidence. But Lorraine and I set a precedent in 1990 in which we did win a case where a woman was driven out of a house in Hebron, Connecticut that was haunted by ghosts. We would have won this case too, and Arne Johnson would have not gone to prison.
Now, is this one of the priests that was in the house?
That's the exorcist.
He was the exorcist?
Yes, he was, and he was very, very badly affected by this case.
Yeah, in what way?
Well, Tony, it was an all-night session at that house one night. All night we were up with the exorcisms and the praying. And it was that night, Tony, that I taught that little boy the guardian angel prayer, that angel of God, my guardian dear. I taught him how to say that prayer. And that seemed to give this child a certain amount of comfort. And we were really exhausted, tired.
But remember, the exorcist is attacked, not just while he's performing exorcism, but in his own rectory.
That's what I was just going to tell you. Now, we left there early morning. Father Virgilac wanted to get back to Norwalk because he was going to say Mass that morning, and his parents were going to be at Mass. He did not want them to know. He didn't want them to be concerned for him. And he had shared things with his sister, but he had not shared things with his dad, who, by the way, was chief of police.
Oh, really?
And so that morning...
Chief of police in Norwalk.
Yes.
In Norwalk.
Yes. Oh, no, not in Brookfield.
Okay. Now, do we have a picture of the Glotzels?
I think, yes, there they are. There's
Okay.
Judy and Carl Glotzel.
That's the mother and father of David.
That is after the boy was exorcised.
Both extremely good people and
Jovial
very patient.
people. Jovial.
Mr. Glotzel there, as big he is, looks like Grizzly Adams, could not hold that boy down alone.
Oh, no, he couldn't hold him
There'd
at
be
all.
sometimes, as I said, 4 and 5 men that would have to hold this boy down.
Okay, let's get into that just a little bit if we could. Now, here's a picture.
All right,
here's a picture of him.
Yes.
What's he
Coming out of possession,
Okay, he's being,
crying, and
That's-
he's holding on to his mother.
That is what he would do, Tony, all the time.
would you say, in your professional opinion, that he was possessed by a devil or a demon, or what would it be exactly?
He was possessed by devils.
By devils.
I would
In fact,
say.
when they were spending the night at the Glotzel home, I went into my study and I called on the devil. I thought it was one devil, which they called the beast, to come to where I was at so I could bind the spirit of that devil so it wouldn't go back into the house.
Okay, what's that bind? What's that mean?
Binding of the spirit. The priests were casting out the devils of the house. I felt that the beast would then come to where I was and I would bind the spirit through that ritual. But Tony, that was one of the most frightening evenings of my life. There was not one devil, there were 43 of them.
43
which
devils.
came to me as a kaleidoscope, as if you were watching one horrible face after another. And remember, I was in that study by myself.
I was saying, what did you do? What happened? What did you do? If it was me, I think I'd have ran out. What did you
Well, I have to be honest with you. I was just stunned. I couldn't move. I was watching it happen very quickly. And as I watched it, it was like a kaleidoscope of horrible faces coming to me. I knew that I had no power up against this. I felt it was one devil, and which they called the beast. But when I seen over 40 of them, I knew that we were dealing with the hierarchy of the diabolical world. At that point, I gave it up, and I went out of the study.
Oh, so you did
I
leave.
left, yes, because I knew that I did not have any control over what was happening here.
Now, I was with the priest at the house during this. So in the morning, I came home with them when they were coming home. And I felt that Father Virgil, particularly, needed some rest before he, and I wanted him to take a nap before he went home because he looked exhausted. Tony, if you ever seen these priests, you know how meticulous they are about their appearance.
Right.
Leaving this house in the morning, they looked like they were coming out of battle, which of course they were. But he related to me that day, coming home, how when he woke up this morning, that his pillow was soaked with blood.
Now, the blood that she's speaking of is called an apport through teleportation. This is meant to frighten the priests. It's meant to frighten us so that we would stop our investigation. But we understand and know the powers of devils. And fortunately for us, we have some type of protection, which I think comes from when I was a boy yet, the Blessed Mother, Padre Pio, whom we pray to all the time. And without this protection, this angelic protection, we wouldn't be sitting here talking right now.
This next slide, Ed, what is this of?
This is the convent where in Brookfield of St. Joseph's, where the first exorcism was performed, which was unsuccessful. It was at this time that I left the convent because nothing was happening and went back to the Brookfield farmhouse. And this is where the rocking chair was going back and forth, and I heard the growling sounds and the pounding sounds.
Now, Tony, I don't want you to think that that blood on the pillow was the priest, because it was not. That was not his own blood. He was not bleeding. That was an apport, something that had dematerialized at one point and reappeared at another point. That was, in this case, really meant to terrify him.
One of the frightening things that occurred to Arne and Debbie, they would sleep on the floor next to David. If he woke up, then they'd be there to control him. And what they seen and described was a bone-like hand that came up through the floor, green, and an arm. Now, again, these types of things are meant to frighten. Because when a person becomes frightened, they will throw off psychic energy into the atmosphere, which a negative force will use as a fuel to manifest itself more.
Okay, now where exactly did the exorcism take place? Oh, there's a slide right here. Is that the church?
Yes, it is, Tony. That's the church. And the doorway that you're off to the right, the basement. See, they now have a new, very beautiful church.
The church in...
That's the church in Brookfield.
That was the first church. There's another one there now.
There's another beautiful church, and it was down in that basement, which was adjacent to the school. Now, Tony, after the exorcism had been performed there, they knew they couldn't do it anymore. There was so much noise and so much violence during that exorcism that it was even heard in the elementary Catholic school.
Well, the doors in back of the church would open and close. The pews were actually moving, which are bolted down. Hymn books that were in the seats next to us flew off the seats. The boy broke away from two of us and attacked the priest.
So
now what is this next slide?
I wanted to show this. Oh, this is Debbie.
Debbie
with
and
Lorraine,
I, yes, that's
and
Debbie.
we're at the shrine in Brookfield right there. That's David's sister.
Right.
We would go there
I brought
a
a model
lot.
with me of a dinosaur here.
You did.
And this model dinosaur had just been completed by David, the young boy who was possessed. And if we could close in on that, as he finished with this, suddenly it started to walk on its own, of its own volition toward the family.
That plastic dinosaur started to walk.
This plastic dinosaur, and a deep, gruff voice came out of it and it said, "Beware, you're all going to die." And you know, one time we were at the church there, we were showing a group of people where the exorcism took place, and a man was taking recordings. And on his recording, he got the same deep, gruff voice which said, "Why are you here?"
Yeah.
Oh,
he
boy.
was, we were explaining, we were talking to a group, Tony, and this man was recording what we were saying about the Brookfield case when
Okay,
that had
so
occurred.
this case,
Now that animated, Tony.
that
It
walked.
actually
It
walked.
That
actually
walked.
walked.
Family.
It doesn't. The thing isn't movable like
You know,
that.
I seem to remember you speaking of a similar incident in the Amityville case. Is that true? Am I
That
thinking
was
of the correct?
the lion, the ceramic lion.
Yes, the
Now,
ceramic.
why would that
teleport.
happen? Is that just to scare everybody? Why would?
It's to frighten people. It's to frighten them, as I said earlier, because as you become frightened, you throw off this psychic energy. Devils, demons, evil spirits can use this as a fuel to manifest more phenomena. They need some kind of energy, and that's the energy.
And you know, David, the voices that he would hear when he was under possession, Tony, they would tell him things. For instance, they told him that Arne Johnson was going to fall out of a tree. And Arne did fall, but thank God, you know, he wasn't badly hurt.
And the beast, as they called him, also told the boy that at the end of the trial, the last day, the lights would dim down in the courtroom, and they did.
And
They did dim. So what was the outcome of that trial?
Well, the outcome was that Arne we couldn't use the defense of the devil made him do it, so I think it was manslaughter.
Yes, because he
And,
served very
Arne
little
got
time.
4 years, but I think he only did 2 years of that.
And
You couldn't keep a young man like this in prison for something he didn't do.
No, and his behavior was excellent. But Tony, him and Debbie were married in prison.
oh, they were.
They were.
They have a business together. They live
Today.
in Milford today.
They have
They're happy.
They have two sons.
They're normal. Everything's normal. now.
Oh yes.
very normal.
Oh, they're
Now,
very
how about
normal.
David? Is David doing okay?
David works with his dad.
Very normal, and
Yeah,
he's
he's
a
fine.
young man today. I guess soon to be married or whatever he's going to be doing.
Yeah.
If we could digress for just a minute. Now, I know when we first started talking about the case,
Yes.
I meant to ask, but I forgot. What is the reason that David
Oh, yes.
was possessed in the first place?
The reason David became possessed was because his mother and sister, unfortunately, were fooling around with witchcraft. They met a group of people in upstate New York while they were snowmobiling, and these people, from what we understand, were into satanic activities. Had them go back to their house that night, and for some reason, they turned on the mother. And when Debbie and Arne at home were looking for a rent, the first time that the beast made itself known was in this small house in Brookfield, where David said that something pushed him onto the bed, and he could see an old man. And the description was a very horrifying description.
Well, he said that, this is how he explained it. He explained that this man was standing there. He told about the plaid shirt the guy was wearing, told everything about the guy. But that night, what he could see in that house appeared in the Brookfield home, their own home. Only now, this little 11-year-old kid, this is how he put it, he was there again in my bedroom, but now he looked all burnt, and he had feet like a deer.
Hoofs.
Oh boy. That's an amazing case. And for anyone who's interested in knowing a little bit more about the case, this is the book that was written back in 1980 by Gerald Brittle and Ed and Lorraine Warren, The Devil in Connecticut. I read the book. It's a fascinating book. For anyone who wants to get the book, it's kind of difficult to get, but if you do find it, you won't be disappointed. And as an added treat, I know Ed and Lorraine would be more than willing to autograph the book for you. And Lorraine, Ed, how can they, again, contact you if they have any problems or questions or letters they'd like to write?
Well, Tony, we are receiving a lot of letters from people who are writing in about problems.
What's the address?
Post Office Box, well, send it to the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren, Post Office Box 41, Monroe, Connecticut, 06468. Now, if they have questions, Tony, or if they have problems, just have them write, and we'll be glad to.
I'd like to add to that. We've had 2 letters last week of people who have hauntings right in this area. We've been to their homes, and we were able to help them.
Very good. Another fascinating case. I thank you both.
Thank you.
So for Ed Warren, Lorraine Warren, I'm Tony Spera. Until next time, good night.
That is the end of the video. Please like and subscribe and get us to 10K subscribers before the end of the year. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.